Good evening. I would like to call to order this Anoka-Hennepin School Board meeting for today, September 22nd, 2025. Please join the board in pledging our allegiance. Our first order of business today is to approve the board agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
We have a motion from Director Langenfeld. Is there a second? Thank you, Director Audette. Any discussion? Hearing none, would all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Any opposed say no. With 6 in favor and 0 opposed, the agenda is approved. Members, our next order of business is recognitions. With item 4A, the school bus safety poster contest winners. We welcome BJ Eisen, the Director of Transportation, and Jeff Muller, Transportation Safety Coordinator. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Duchesne, Superintendent McIntyre, members of the board. We are here tonight, as you said, to recognize our our district, our state, and even national contestants in our school bus poster award. And to do that, I'm going to turn it over to our Transportation Safety Coordinator, Jeff Mueller.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and to recognize our students. This is our 30th annual bus safety poster contest, and I've been able to be a part of 27 of those, so I'm pretty proud about being able to see so many of these great posters over the years. But this year, our theme was safety first, safety always. And I would like to welcome, we have one of our contestants, Amina Mohammed. Now, Amina comes from McKinley Elementary, and your poster won our district competition and won the state competition. You and I went to the Twins game, right? Yeah, that was fun. We got to go on the field and see our posters on the Jumbotron. Wasn't that cool? Yeah. And Amina was able to do a wonderful cable TV story from Channel 15. And she did just a marvelous job with that. She talked about how important school bus safety was to her and to others. And I believe in that you mentioned that you like to help others. Is that correct? Yes, wonderful. Well, we appreciate your poster very, very much. And we're thankful to be here this evening. All right.
Congratulations.
Should we get our picture taken?
Board members, as they're transitioning to, I just want to acknowledge Jeff Mueller, who is going to be retiring soon. And the legacy, Jeff, you've left in the district with the focus on safety for all those years you mentioned earlier, you will be dearly missed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Once the district has finished taking their picture, we'd invite parents or principals or anybody else that's here to celebrate this student to come up and take their own pictures. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
right. Members, the next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. As normal, members can remove items for separate consideration and discussion if that is their desire. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented? Thank you, Director Audette. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Director Simon. Any discussion? Hearing none, would all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Any opposed say no. With 6 in favor and 0 opposed, our consent agenda is approved. Members, our next agenda item is communications, delegations, and petitions. This is time for our community members to provide input directly to the school board about issues that fall within the school board's authority. We plan this agenda item for about 15 minutes, and our policy allows for community members to speak for up to 5 minutes. If there are several people that want to speak, the chair can reduce the time in order to hear from all and keep the meeting on schedule. We do only have four yellow cards, so we'll do 4 minutes each. If you'll help me keep a timer, Co-Chair Arco, thank you. And if anyone else has a yellow card they want to complete, you can provide it to Ms. Ball, and then we can provide a written follow-up to you. Just a few quick procedural reminders. The meeting participation procedures are in place to ensure open and orderly discussion in our public comments, as well as to protect the due privacy, the due process and privacy rights of individuals under the law. If speakers use specific names of students, staff, or board members, I will need to interrupt and stop the speaker. Please remember, direct your comments to the school board chair, and members of the audience, please listen respectfully so that the board can hear our speakers. If we cannot hear, we may have to reset the timer and allow them to continue their remarks. Any audience members that are disruptive may be asked to leave for the remainder of the meeting. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. Our first speaker tonight is John Wohlhopter. Welcome.
Members of the board, Superintendent McIntyre. My name is John Wohlhopter, and I am the president of Anoka-Hennepin Education, Minnesota. We have been negotiating with your designated team throughout the summer. I will be blunt. The parameters you have provided your team remain insufficient to meet the needs of the educators of Anoka-Hennepin. While we have made progress on a variety of contract language items we believe will benefit both the district and teachers, the insurance costs and financial terms proposed to date are unaffordable for our members. Every offer we have received would have the educators of Anoka-Hennepin fall behind peers in nearby districts, while spending the next 2 years treading water financially. This risks turning Anoka-Hennepin into a farm team from which other districts will draw away highly qualified educators that our students need and deserve. At your June 23rd meeting, the board approved terms and conditions for various administrative and senior leadership employees. The contributions you approved for those groups fully cover the cost of single insurance. You also approved a 20% increase in the family contribution for these groups, on top of what was already a higher benefit than most other employee groups. Individuals in that admin group received pay raises between 3 and 19%. At the same time, Anoka-Hennepin teachers are seeing paychecks that are hundreds of dollars less than 3 months ago. If Anoka-Hennepin can provide affordable health insurance and raises to some employees, it can provide affordable health insurance and raises to all employees. Just 2 weeks ago, the board received an update that the fund balance has now increased to approximately 12%. This is up from 9.8% in June of 2024. We understand your dedication to maintaining the financial stability of the district. We need you to show the same dedication to maintaining the financial stability of the district employees. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Matt Van Zee. Welcome.
Good evening, members of the school board and Dr. McIntyre. My name is Matt Van Zee, and I teach 8th grade ELA at Roosevelt Middle School. I love my job. I've always considered it my calling. It's an honor to serve the students and families of our community. I'm in my 21st year in our district, and I always believed I would spend my whole career here. Unfortunately, since 2020, our health insurance premiums have skyrocketed. My individual premiums are up 157% during that time. This is a far greater rate than the overall market. I'm a father of 4, and insurance strains my family's finances. We live a simple lifestyle with a careful budget. We drive high mileage vehicles, we buy most of our clothing and all of our furniture secondhand. Yet due to increases in our health insurance, I've needed to donate plasma to pay for groceries. I have spoken to district leadership about the rising cost of insurance, yet the consistent message is this is the best we can do. I talked to 6 neighboring districts about their insurance plans, and the difference is shocking. Anoka-Hennepin teachers on my lowest cost family plan pay an average of $6,500 more per year for worse insurance compared to neighboring districts. This gap can't be the best we can do. If our insurance isn't fixed, teachers will ask, no matter how much we love this district, how can we stay here when our take-home pay would be so much higher in a neighboring district? This spring, when I saw that my insurance would cut almost $5,000 from my take-home pay, I almost applied in 2 of these districts. Fortunately, I was offered an overload teaching assignment, and that allowed me to stay at Roosevelt Middle School and make up for the pay cut. But what about next year, when my overload is gone? For the good of my family, I have to strongly consider neighboring districts, and it breaks my heart to say that. I'm one of many teachers facing these awful questions due to our insurance. Please fix this. Empower your negotiators to make our insurance right at the negotiating table by moving to a percentage-based model instead of a flat contribution model. Examine our insurance plans very closely. Something has to be terribly wrong to create a $6,500 gap with other districts. The district often lauds our self-insured status, but being self-insured isn't working anymore. I believe these problems can be solved, and our public has elected you to solve them so our students can keep learning from this amazing group of teachers behind me. We want to stay. Please help us. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
I do have the numbers from other districts. And
Yeah, you can leave that with Ms. Ball right here for us. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Rebecca Defoe.
Got some visual aids.
Welcome.
Thank you, school board members and Superintendent McIntyre, for allowing me to speak today. As seen on our district webpage, it is the vision of Anoka-Hennepin Schools to be a public school system of excellence with high-quality staff and programs and successful graduates. It is also stated on our 25-26 strategic priorities to improve employee retention, recruitment and retention. Right here. But I don't think you really mean retain the high-quality teachers. My name is Rebecca Defoe, and this is my 30th year teaching math. This year, I took a $6,300 pay cut. Let me say that a different way. My paycheck is $6,300 less than it was last year due to our insurance costs. That is a 69% increase. On average, the state of Minnesota has increased health insurance costs by 16.2%. As far as the state of Minnesota is concerned, I have approximately 9 more years of teaching to get my full retirement package. There is no way with a 1 to 2% cost of living raise, even though cost of living is much higher than 1 to 2% right now, that I would ever recoup that $6,300. As I finish my beloved career, I would actually be going backwards. That does not feel like anyone out there is fighting to retain my job. Think about all the other careers out there. would it be okay to pay them less as they get more experience? That just doesn't feel right to me. Please, I ask that you give the go-ahead to your negotiating team to make this right. Otherwise, I'm concerned for our district, and I'm concerned for the state of our teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Shannon Fox. Shannon Fox. Welcome.
Hello all. My name is Shannon Fox, and I'm an ELA teacher at Anoka Middle School for the Arts. In January of this year, my husband passed away. He suffered a cardiac arrest due to an unknown bout of pneumonia. I gave him CPR for 10 minutes before the paramedics gave him CPR for another 14. They were able to reestablish a strong pulse, but it wasn't enough. He had already suffered catastrophic brain damage due to lack of oxygen. My children and I made the decision to let him go. I became a single mom overnight. Whereas the details of my situation are unique to me, my actual situation is a common lifestyle shared by many, many of this district's teachers. Single parents trying to get by. Here I ask you to have empathy. Put yourself in my shoes and the shoes of other employees like me. Since January, I have picked up a third paying job in order to support my children and I through the ever-increasing financial demands of our society's growing inflation. Right now, you are asking us to take a pay cut, pay higher insurance premiums, and live life less. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, inflation rose from 2.7% in July to 2.9% in August. That is not going down. That is almost 3% on goods plus higher insurance premium through service. In order to live now, I may need a fourth paying job. Do you work during the day, the night, and the weekends? Are you present with your children? This isn't about a bottom line on a piece of paper. This is about empathy. This is about knowing you can and you should provide for your teachers as you would want to be provided for. And you need to do it now, before the holiday season, before the next big inflation increase, preferably before I have to go back to work this weekend. Put yourself in my situation and those employees like me. As a passionate teacher, I want what others want, a strong no-phone policy, safety in the classrooms, etc. What I don't want is to be burnt out working outside of my passion in order to survive because my district doesn't have enough empathy to take care of its teachers. Do you know every religion has a version of the golden rule? To do to others as you would want done to you? I ask you to do to your employees like you would want done to you in your job. Would you sit idle for pay cut and higher insurance premiums? Would this be okay with you? Thank you.
Thank you. That was our last yellow card. So board, our next agenda item is item 7, board calendar and district updates. I'll turn it to Superintendent McIntyre.
All right, thank you, Co-Chair DeShane. And maybe I'll just give it a moment. I want to thank all of our teachers who came out this evening. All right, board members, I'll jump right in here. So you heard a little bit about recruitment and retention this evening, and I'm looking to our friends over here, Jim and Heather, with our presentation. First of all, we welcomed about 280 new teachers for our new teacher orientation this year, and that added a group of teachers to our nearly 8,000 staff is a sign of our efforts and our hiring efforts here this fall. One of the things we wanted to bring back to the board was the fact that our ability to fill positions across the district in all areas, all departments, has improved, and we are, yet we're continuing to try to fill those remaining positions, and we have another hiring effort coming up on October 7th at Coon Rapids High School. This event runs from 3:30 to 5:30. For anyone in the public who wants a little more details on that, it's in the atrium area right at door 1. And we still have positions to fill, working as a paraeducator to prepare and serve meals, maintain our school facilities, in our student transportation department, and many more areas. So all that information is available on our website at ahschools.us/jobs. And if you are able to fill out an application ahead of time, you can come prepared to interview for positions right on the spot there at the event. Also, people in our community can call 763-506-JOBS. So again, 763-506-JOBS for more information. I did want to take a moment to recognize a couple operational areas now that we're a few weeks into the school year. Anoka-Hennepin continues the largest system for student transportation in the state of Minnesota with 9 transportation partners. And BJ Eisen was here earlier tonight, provided me with some highlights from the beginning of the school year. So every day we safely transport approximately 32,000 students to and from school using nearly 300 yellow buses and an additional 100 passenger vehicles. We have 8,000 bus stops to pick up and deliver students. Our 9 partners are also still actively recruiting for drivers, although our situation with staffing and service delivery has vastly improved from past years. So I just want to give a moment, or take a moment, to thank our entire transportation department team. Also want to take a moment to recognize our child nutrition team. So the district serves over 27,000 lunches daily and nearly 10,000 breakfasts, again, every day. Both of those numbers continue to show strong participation in our program. Now, I will say what I'm hearing is the most popular school lunch continues to be orange chicken. The busiest day of our high schools so far has been the hot honey pepperoni pizza. And what I hear also is at our elementary school is that the beef barbecue smokies with whole grain pretzel bites is a contender, though, to take over that top spot. So I just want to take a moment to thank our nutrition director, Noah Atlas, and the entire child nutrition team for really stepping up and doing all they can to feed our students breakfast and lunch. Now to transition to our North Metro Career Fair that is coming up. In October, October is the month, it's Manufacturers Month across Minnesota, and high school students from throughout the district will explore real-world pathways in manufacturing and in the trades, right in our area at the Made in North Metro Career Fair. The North Metro Chamber of Commerce and the Anoka County Job Training Center are partnering to promote the event, which is set for Wednesday, October 8th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the National Sports Center in Blaine. The school district is an active partner with the North Metro Chamber and their members in working hard to match student interests in the trades and manufacturing with the options available in all of our communities. So we plan to, actually looking ahead to next month, take an opportunity to share more highlights of our career and technical education programs with the board. And then finally, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that this month is, September is School Board Member Recognition Month in the state of Minnesota. This is a time to recognize the dedicated service to our schools and our communities from our own Anoka-Hennepin School Board members. I have the opportunity to work closely with all of you, so I get to see and have an up-close look at your dedication to serving our communities and for improving outcomes for our students. We don't always get the chance to say thank you for stepping up and serving, so let me say that now. Thank you all for all you do to make our schools the best they can be. Even through the challenges that we face, your service is deeply appreciated. So in recognition of your service, tonight, over there by Theo, you're receiving a small token of our appreciation. Those are flower arrangements made by our students through the River Blooms program at Two Rivers Transition Program at Franklin. So thank you to the staff and students at Two Rivers Transition Program at Franklin. This is a new program that reuses donated floral arrangements. So again, they reuse donated floral arrangements, which gives them a work-based educational option and career options for our students. So if you get a moment, send them a thank you. Appreciate their efforts. Co-Chair DeShane, that concludes my superintendent's report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent McIntyre. Board members, any questions? Director Langenfeld.
Do you have to be in a CTE program to attend that event?
No, I don't
Okay.
believe so.
Okay.
But I can follow up with more details.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would appreciate that.
I don't believe that's the
because-
case.
Because often there are people, young women in particular, who don't always attend those kinds of events. And then
Right.
if they do have that opportunity, they find themselves in a space and place they didn't
Interested,
know
yes.
existed, and they fall in love. So,
Sparking interest there, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
All right, members, our next agenda item is finance. Item 8A, the preliminary tax certification for taxes payable 2026. We welcome Michelle Vargas, our Chief Financial Officer. Welcome.
Good evening, Chair DeShane, Superintendent McIntyre, members of the board. Tonight, I have our presentation of our preliminary tax certification for taxes collected in fiscal year, or calendar year 2026 to support our 26-27 school year. The timeline for our proposed tax levy is based on the Minnesota Department of Education preparing the first draft of the levy limits in early September. The next is tonight, where we set the proposed levy. So you set an initial tax levy for the tax rates that will come out in the November mailing. The traditional way to approve this is the maximum amount, so that if there are any corrections that are made, they're able to do that without having to come back every time there's a 2-cent or $12 change. November 4th, as you know, there's election day. This election day does not affect the tax levy. We do not have any referendums or bonds on this election. And then in mid-November, the county mails out the proposed tax statements to all property owners. And then we will be back again December 8th for the public hearing, the Truth and Taxation Required hearing. That will be held within the meeting that starts at 6:30 here at the Education Center. Can be watched online, and then the board will certify the final at that regular meeting after the Truth and Taxation, and the public is allowed to speak. So our proposed tax levy has many different categories. We have referendum, the local optional levy, lease levy, operating capital levy. Many of our funding sources have a levy and a state aid component to them in the funding formulas. Achievement integration, career and technical levy, long-term facilities, our safe schools, alternative teacher compensation, otherwise known as Q-Comp, community education levies, and then our debt levies, which are voter-approved, and OPEB levies. Each one of those levy limits are set by state law or voter approval. Our current proposed tax levy for payable 2026 fiscal year 27 is $135.5 million levy. As you can see, it is a reduction of $2.7 million, or minus 1.97%. Again, this is set based on all of the calculations that are set either voter approved or in state statute. This next slide shows our categories and the changes between them. As you can see, it's by fund. You have the general fund, community service fund, and then the two debt funds. The pinks and the blues represent our taxes are spread either by referendum market value, which is a straight value, versus adjusted net tax capacity, which is based on rates, depending on the type of property that it is. So our referendum, local option, equity, and transition levy are all based on referendum market value. Overall, you can see we have some changes up and down, but what you're going to see, the majority of our changes tonight has to do with our reduction in pupil units. So when we were doing this a couple years ago. We were projecting that we were growing. That catches up to you when it doesn't happen, so they have to make the changes later. So the majority of our changes tonight that you'll see are due to reduced pupil units as from previous years. So overall, in the general fund, we're going down 2.5 million. The largest area is going to be in prior year adjustments. The next slides have some of those larger changes on it. Community service, the school age care is the one that tends to go up. That's based on services for our special education students in our aftercare programs, the services that are provided. Debt service are always based on what our principal and interest payments are due for the bonded debt, and then adjusted up or down based on the fund balance if they can pull it back, because you levy at 105% of the expected amount, so that builds up and then they pull it back. So overall, again, we're looking at a $2.7 million decrease, or 1.97%. Some of the items that affect some of the calculations have to do with our adjusted net tax capacity and the referendum market values. The formulas, the equalizations are based on these calculations of the dollar amounts that we have in adjusted net tax capacity per our adjusted pupil units. As you can see, overall, the adjusted net tax capacity went down, but because of our pupil units went down per adjusted pupil unit, it still increased slightly. What we are seeing in values are commercial industrial, and our apartments were dropping in some property values of what we could see on the reports that I have access to. Our referendum market values, that straight value of every parcel in the Anoka-Hennepin area, went up 2.2%, so that would include any additional tax capacity, any new buildings, and just values. So as you can see, values have kind of leveled off at a smaller, where we are seeing double-digit increases the last few years. Again, you can see our referendum market value per adjusted pupil unit went up from 763,000 to 781,000. That calculation, we still don't get any aid on the first, on any of our levy, the referendum, because we have too much per adjusted pupil unit to obtain that. That's one of those items that when we go to the legislature, we're always trying to get it changed, so we actually get some aid on that portion. This is the calculation that amount affects that. So as you can see, our adjusted pupil units that were estimated for fiscal year 26 were 41,595. Our estimate for 27 is 4702. So you can see there is a decline there. That affects the calculations. So some of the major adjustments, although 81,000 isn't a major adjustment, our referendum and the local option, the referendum is based on the voter-approved amount. The voter-approved amount increases with inflation. The inflation factor that is set based on the CPI is 2.37% that they expect it to be. So that increased by $33. Our current referendum is $1,187.93 per adjusted pupil unit for fiscal year 27. The cap is $2,340.76. So we often talk about what is the cap, where is Anoka-Hennepin. So we're about $1,152 under the cap at this time. The change then, although we have an increase which generates revenue by getting that additional $33, the offset of the reduction of about 893 pupil units between the two fiscal years ends up in a net revenue reduction of $314,000. The next area, again, is in our prior year adjustments. So when we levied for fiscal year 26, the current year, the amount we projected to have for our pupil units is higher than we actually have. So as we update those numbers with the Minnesota Department of Education, they adjust the levy. So our adjustments in here are a negative 2.45 million versus a negative 612,000, or 612, that should be 1,000 adjustment last year. So that change in it is that 1.8 million. And the adjustment for the prior year is that 1.4 million due to the reduction in estimate pupil units in the LOR and the referendum. The other adjustments are abatements, $351,000. They pretty much go down the line on every one of the calculations. So there'd be a small amount for operating capital, small amount for LTFM based on that 893,000. 893 pupil units. I'm just bringing out the larger ones that are in there. The next item are long-term facilities maintenance. Again, this is due to the reduction in 893. It's based on a dollar amount per student that our maximum amount is. We mentioned school-age care. Based on our estimated costs, actual cost is then adjusted. So when we report our UFARS data, they're adjusted the prior year, what we actually spent on that, and then it will go back and levy that amount. So there was an increase of 400,000 based on what we project our future costs to be. This one just shows that there are a couple of them that have aid and levy in part of the calculation. So our referendum, overall, a net adjustment of $314,000. A portion of it is a reduction in aid of $233,000. We do still get some aid on the local optional revenue, but none on the referendum portion. Our prior year adjustments are all 100% just based on levy. Anything that's done in aid is all done based during the fiscal year. They can adjust that. That's done on our ideas reports that we get monthly. And then the long-term facilities maintenance also has an aid component. So overall, the revenue went down, total revenue $339,000, but our aid went up $173,000, and the levy went down $513,000. They still have adjustments that are being made to the equalization factor for LTFM. And then the school age care is 100% levy, so you can see that full adjustment is an increase of revenue of $400,000 and an increase in the levy. Looking at a history of our levy, you can see that we went up for several years, and now we went down as a reduction the last 2 years from 138.2 million now to 135.5 million. So that just shows a history the last 10 years of our total levy. And then the last slide is the page in the report that we get from the Minnesota Department of Education that shows our total proposed levy. And what I ask as we open it up for questions is for you to approve the maximum, and then that way that allows them to make any accounting adjustments without having to come back again and make any small adjustments to it. And then again, it will be back the final once tax rates and all of that are calculated, and we'll have tax impact. At this point in time, as you look at a 1.97 decrease, anybody whose value stays the same would be looking at a decrease in their taxes, but we know that everybody's parcel is different and based on assessments and that it can change. So I will open it up to questions and then seek your approval.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Members, any questions for Ms. Vargas? Director Audette?
Thank you. Just a couple, I think they're easy. The first, under your category of referendum and local option levy, that 2.37% increase for inflation, is that statutory amount that they've put on for our increase, or what? Where is that based off of?
It's based on the same formula, the CPI,
Yep.
that they use for the general ed formula.
Yep.
So then that's about the same amount they would be estimating for the
Okay.
general ed formula for 27. They use then for the increase on the levy.
Good. And then my other question, just looking at the school levy history chart, in this case, you're saying the main driver of the decrease is APU? And
Yes.
Was it true that in all those years, if it was going up, the main driver was also APU, and then it has just fallen the last few, or is that generally true?
I would say it's generally true. We did have an election back in 2017 that you can see hit and pay 2018. That would have been the election that was fit for the future.
Yep.
So yes, it's a combination of growth. I'd have to go back to see if there are any changes in any of the formulas. I don't know, but it is growth, but that the 2017 election Fit for the Future
Yep.
was the driver of some of that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Director Langenfeld?
Thank you for the presentation. Just a reiteration of the statement that you talked about, the $1,187 per student, and that's the per pupil unit that we're at, and yet there potentially are school districts out there that are getting $2,340 per unit. Is that
That's
accurate?
correct.
And I think our public doesn't always recognize that potentially there are significant more dollars in some school districts than others. So I just wanted to point that out, and no comment on it, but just the reality, I think, out there that people sometimes miss that understanding, that the neighbor could have $1,000 more per student, and they might see things in their school that maybe we're not seeing in ours.
Members, any other questions? Could you talk just briefly about how a decrease in levy impacts our budget discussions, or how levy and budget interplay with each other?
For the most part, as we look at building the fiscal year '27 budget, once these are certified, we'll update all of our projections from that. At this point in time, I'm not seeing a change in the projections. We have other areas where we're seeing increases, some of our special ed revenue and some of the other items. But at this point in time, this generates the revenue, so what we've been using for the 2 years and the estimates are still fairly close. I'm not seeing this change from that standpoint at this time.
So is it fair to say that this information is one of the inputs used to the budget discussions as the
Absolutely.
revenue side of the discussion?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is the levy portion of the revenue that, when approved in December, is then hard and sealed for our fiscal year '27 revenue for the levy portion, yes.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Members, anything else? All right. Our next, thank you so much for the presentation.
I'm looking for an
Oh,
approval to
excuse me.
certify to the maximum tonight.
Yes. All right. Members, before us is the approval of the preliminary tax certification for taxes payable 2026 as presented in Appendix K. We have discussed, and hearing no further request for discussion, I would entertain a motion to approve the preliminary tax certification for taxes payable 2026 as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Director Simon. Is there a second? Thank you, Director Langenfeld. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, would all those in favor say aye? Aye. Any opposed, say no. With 6 in favor and 0 opposed, that motion is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll go to our next agenda item, Board. This is also Finance, item 8B, Phase 3 Budget Reduction and Reallocation Process. We will keep Superintendent McIntyre, Michelle Vargas, our Chief Financial Officer, and add Tanya Constantine, the Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Ginger Gustafson, the Interim Assistant Superintendent for Elementary Schools, and Dr. Annette Ziegler, the Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Schools. Thank you all for being here.
All right, thank you, Court Chair DeShane and board members. Again, good evening. As our team gets settled in, this is one of those additional challenges. I guess I'd say we're all here with a little bit of a heavy heart here, having to be in a space where we have to come forward with additional budget reduction conversation. No one wants to be in that space, but I appreciate the board members leaning into that. And I'll start with saying we highly value all the services and supports and programs and all of our employees in the district when we have to get into making some really hard decisions. So over the past 2 phases, if Jim, you want to move on here, we'll talk about, tonight we'll talk about Phase 1 and just a review of Phase 1 and 2 of those reductions and realignments. Many times we have people hearing this for the first time. We'll review our overview of the 26-27 budget, and again with Phase 3 reductions in that target that we discussed at our last work session. and then we'll get into the Phase 3 reduction considerations and options. So again, over the past 2 years, we've worked hard to make 14 million in reductions, and we really did this with one guiding principle: to do our best to protect our schools and classrooms from the deepest cuts possible. So again, thank you to the board for working through that process. So that is why we focused those first 2 phases of reductions exclusively really in the central office operations and minimizing that impact at our sites. We now find ourselves in that difficult position again to have to identify that third phase of cuts totaling an additional $8 million. So the simple choices are just no longer available, and it gets harder. And what remains are really tough ones from choices that none of us like. It will not be easy. Our commitment, though, tonight is to work through with the board and really start the process. Tonight's an information session, just beginning this process, which we'll talk about later in the timeline, and really some options around incredibly difficult choices. It's a shared challenge, but I believe our collective understanding and expertise together will rise to that tough challenge. Just to step back in time a bit, at the school board meeting on August 25th, the timeline for Phase 3 reductions was shared, and then at the school board work session on September 8th, we had an initial budget reduction discussion around considerations which were reviewed and discussed. So tonight, the board's not being asked to take any action on any recommendations. That's not required, and at least at this point, scheduled to be on the agenda for December 8th. So there will be opportunities for public review and input over the coming weeks with, again, that board decision on December 8th. We'll cover more of the details on the timeline a little bit later. So thanks in advance for your patience and understanding, and we look forward to our community engagement process and the input and feedback that we'll get over the next few months. Okay, so moving on to the next slide here, just a quick review of really the factors that have kind of been present throughout Phase 1, Phase 2, and now Phase 3. Michelle covered a few of those things as we looked at the tax levy. We're continuing to watch our enrollment. We've had really limited or stable enrollment. Now we've seen some signs of some increases here. We'll have to wait and see till we get deeper into October to see if that holds up with the different adds and drops in our enrollment across the district. But up to this point, really pretty flat enrollment, and knowing that we are funded on our enrollment when those numbers are neither going up or down, neither is our revenue. In addition, our federal pandemic relief funds are now expired, and that is also having an impact, and we've already begun to discuss those positions that were brought on with those additional funds now, how to make some decisions about those short-term positions that were added. In addition, we have 18 employee groups, and those previous contract settlements were higher than the available budget. We've talked about the revenue side from the state, federal, and even just tonight again on the local property taxes that we get here. We are halfway to that cap, as Director Langenfeld brought up, and you're right, we have neighboring districts that are fully at that cap. So that third prong is a challenge for us here locally. Looking forward, the state funding formula is tied to that consumer price index and cannot be higher than 3%. And the cost to really settle our contracts along the way has been higher than that here more recently, while our inflationary costs for transportation and other district operations have really been between 5 and 10%. So that's the challenge when we compare that to the revenue side of under 3%. The district doesn't anticipate any new revenue from federal sources or any new increases, at least at this time, from the state. We keep hearing about a projected deficit budget into the next biennium. It's just another reality of what we know right now. So we're actually grateful that we have the consumer price index ability to have a slight increase to help offset some of those increased costs. But we'll continue to monitor that. And like all districts across the state, we continue to be required to implement underfunded or unfunded mandates. So because of all those factors, we've gone through 2 phases of budget reductions, and now in this third one as we plan ahead for this process for the 26-27 school year. Some additional considerations as we move on the presentation. Things we take into account when we're planning. So our district strategic priorities, our enrollment, as mentioned before, our range of programs and services, how we've taken a phased or staggered approach to those reductions, really taking a piece at a time. Up to this point, phase 1 and 2 have been primarily at the central office. The impact of previous reductions, if we go back in time, we've been through a process where we've had to close schools or repurpose schools. Those have lasting impacts. We've covered a number of times the restricted and unrestricted funding areas, and there's a document in your materials as a background supporting document that really goes through in about 80 slides, a breakdown, a detailed breakdown of those restricted versus unrestricted funding areas and the cost centers that go with that. The board has wrestled with and talked about how to use fund balance over time. We closely watch our staffing allocations. We look at operational efficiencies. We look at existing schedules at each level, elementary, middle, and high school, and the instructional time and teacher collaboration time within those schedules. And then, as Michelle brought up earlier too, we have a full range of legal and financial compliance requirements that we monitor closely for the impact on our overall budget. So phase 1 was, the board acted on those reductions really in the February through April window of the 24-25 school year. And that goal of phase 1 is to try to reduce and realign central office and district administration to minimize the impact on our school operations for the following year. So that was a $5.1 million reduction. About 40 positions were reduced and another nearly 10 realigned, so affecting nearly 50 positions. And then an additional $1.1 million in non-personnel reductions in the areas of transportation and district technology. At that time, we were wrestling with a target, based on our knowledge of our revenues and expenditures of about $30 million. We were able to reduce that down to $26 million as we moved through that school year. And we really took the time at that point to share out with our public that phase 1 work. Then the board took on the process of phase 2 cuts, which resulted in an additional $9 million of reductions, primarily at central office and district administration, in a number of areas. They're listed on the slide here, ranging from senior leadership to buildings and grounds, finance, technology, transportation, HR, communications, our RET department, special education and student services, and also in community education. So those reductions went into effect July 1st, this past summer. And again, we had a robust process for getting our communications out about those items throughout that process. So that kind of sets the table for our work that we've began to cover last work session. We're going to cover again just the high-level 26-27 budget overview in the next 3 slides, and I'll have Michelle Vargas walk you through those.
Thank you, Superintendent McIntyre. So for our 26 budget that's adopted that we're currently in, we have a $780 million budget. Of that budget, the amount that we're looking at for our reductions is the shortage in our general fund. Our general fund is $700 million, or 90% of our budget. We have other operating funds, our food service fund, our community service fund, the debt service fund, and the trust fund. Those funds are not available to close the deficit in the general fund. You cannot transfer from those funds into the general fund. To the contrary, if the food service fund or the community service fund were to go into a deficit, the general fund is required to help bail them out. So we just want, when we talk about restricted in the general fund, we wanted to look at an overall of our total budget for the $780 million. The next slide breaks down our fiscal year 26 budget. There are restricted budgets that are based on statute and reserves, and then there are restrictions within the type of funding. So trying to break it down in that 80-page document and giving, for anybody to see all the different components and how staff are allocated in those components, supply budgets and all that, that's what it makes up. So you can see within this area, of the $700 million, we're looking really in the areas of the unassigned, and we broke that down by your pre-K-12 programs, which are basically your school sites. Those are that area, the largest area at 39%. Operations, that's your transportation and your buildings and grounds, so the operations of buildings and that. Central services, that's going to be within the areas of finance and some curriculum and HR and legal, all of our areas that are considered district support services. And then we have another area, which are those expenses that aren't assigned yet at this point in time because they're substitutes. You don't know exactly where they're going to land. They're severance, they're those type of payments, and they end up in that other unassigned other. And the breakdown of those are all in that larger page. So the area that we're looking really in, although there are some flexibilities within some of the restricted accounts, what expenses that are in the unassigned can backfill, you still, you don't have the flexibility to just allocate those out without the restrictions, and that's just kind of what we wanted to do with the statutes referenced and everything in that other document. So moving on to the projection for the 27, as we roll 26 into 27, and as we filled out, all of the budget in the 26 budget, we reduced the target from the 15.5 million to 8 million. What we've noticed, we've had increased investment earnings. We've talked about that. They are starting to move the interest rate down, so we're hoping that will still hold. But what we are seeing is that we have reduced insurance premium costs due to the fact that we're getting a higher reimbursement from our OPEB because our retirees are costing more. So what happens with that? That's that reimbursement that we get from the OPEB debt. And then we're also seeing that our employees are less are taking family, less are taking insurance to begin with. That's about half of that. So about half of the 1% reduction in that we have in that portion that we're saying. The other part is we're seeing that our estimated costs on our labor costs are slightly lower. So as staff move through, that you project them to move through the contracts, hiring, retention, all of that, retirees. So about half of that is that. So about 0.5% is based a good portion on what we're seeing in insurance costs, which has to do with retiree reimbursement and overall contributions based on what our employees are taking, and then just overall labor costs, which is 70% of our budget, so a large area to look at. So the adjusted target at this point in time is 8 million that we've been looking at.
Director Simon?
Thanks, Michelle. On that slide right there, just a quick question. On the bottom, it talks about unassigned fund balance at 5.5%. Is that without cutting 8 million, or is that after cutting 8 million?
That is without cutting 8 million.
Okay.
And that
So
was
if we
based
cut
on
8
our-
million, what would our fund balance be if everything remains the same? Obviously, there will be a little adjustments, but if we do cut the target of 8 million, what would our fund balance be, percent-wise?
With our updated target and the updated projection in the fiscal year 26, we haven't amended the budget yet, where we're finishing fiscal year 25 at about 11.5%, and the projected spend down to 26, now not being the full 15.5 million, but more of the 8 million. If we make the cuts, we'll be just under 10%.
Okay, got
Is the
it.
projected amount, if everything is exactly as planned.
Understood.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, board members, I'll move on here. The next slide is just a reminder of our timeline. This is the Phase 3 budget reductions process for this fall. Again, we started this past summer with setting the target and timeline, finalizing that work in August and early September, with, again, final approval set for that December 8th school board meeting. So like I mentioned earlier, ample opportunity for staff and community feedback through our community forums and online survey starting tomorrow. We're going to be at Anoka Middle School for the Arts, Fred Moore campus. And just like in previous phases, the top of this document really kind of reflects the school board related areas. And the section below the timeline are the actions taken by the staff to support the timeline. But you can really see just a subtle adjustment here between the October and December months. And we will bring back any revisions for most community meetings to the October 27th board meeting. And then there'll be another opportunity for additional feedback after that regular board meeting in October. with those final recommendations presented for board approval to be expected to happen on December 8th. That still puts us, it's a tighter squeeze, but it still puts us in line to begin our staffing process with the timeline that we need for staffing right after the winter break, to make sure we are ahead of the process for recruitment and retention efforts for our staffing of all of our schools. So moving on, this slide was one we covered out at the work session, and there was really good questions from board members about some details around the strategic investments. If you remember back through those conversations, the strategic investments were directed by a previous school board and were done with one-time limited term funds, using funds that were over the district's 10% fund balance guideline at the time. Those funds were meant to be a short-term investment for additional supports to address the impact of the pandemic and as the district worked to get back to the stability we desired. Under the previous administration and board, those strategic investments, those one-time funds were provided to each level. So there was money provided to elementary, middle, and high school, and those levels were given flexibility on how best to use those resources based on the needs of their levels. It was clear at the front end of that commitment that these were one-time funds. They were never intended to be long-term, unless there was different funds available should those come. But it was really meant to be an infusion of money to continue to address the current needs that were there at the time. So these strategic investment funds, based on the board decision last November, are in their final year. They're separate from the ongoing budget shortfall the district's facing in Phase 3. And one of the questions, actually a few of the questions at the last work session, was just to get some additional information about what does that mean? Get some clarification and detail on these funds, what they pay for, and what's the impact when they do end at the end of this year. So I'm going to have Annette just kind of quickly walk through the next slide, if our team can move the slide deck forward, with some additional detail here on what specifically is in those $4.8 million of strategic investments.
Thank you, Superintendent McIntyre. So you can see what we did was we provided the grade level, the FTE, and maybe just a little bit more of clarification of what those positions entail. So the teacher support academic coach, you can see that for the 14.5 FTE, there's 4.5 that are at the middle level and 10 that are at the high school. So the 4.5 are instructional coaches that support at that level, and the 10, there are 5 that support math and 5 that support literacy at the high school. The teacher academic support do things that work directly with students. So there's 8 FTE at the middle school level and 1 FTE at the high school. So in essence, what that will do at the middle school level is that will eliminate intervention teachers at the middle school level, along with what you'll see in a future slide with ESSER funds. Intervention classes are maintained though, so these are, the reading classes and different things that you see that are put into the, the registration guides. So I just wanted to make sure that's a clear distinction. Teacher math intervention, that is at the elementary level, that's 4.3 FTEs. That does not take away all of the math intervention at the elementary level. Counselor, that is a middle school position. That does obviously not take away all of those positions as well. Student support is, again, another academic support position at the high school level. Literacy intervention, you're familiar with those, the literacy intervention teachers, teacher science, and then a principal, assistant principal at the high school level. So that just gives you a little bit more detail about those positions.
Director Simon.
I think I'm on. Thanks, Annette. A question on this. So I believe I'm correct in that these strategic investments were utilized at high schools for really kind of student disruption, if you will, right? Like reset rooms and things like that. I think a few of us toured Blaine High School's very successful program. I know that those folks presented at a board work session previously, a few years ago. And I'm very familiar with what's happening at Coon Rapids High School with that. Am I right that I just, like looking at the positions that you just detailed, it doesn't make sense in my head that there was only 1 FTE at high school potentially that did that? Because I think we gave FTE at every high school. So tell me where I'm wrong and why I'm not understanding from your detail here about
thank
where
you.
those folks would be.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Dr. Simon. There's going to be another slide that I think Superintendent McIntyre is going to get to in just probably the next slide or two. Those are combination with the ESSER funds, so you will see that coupled with the strategic investments and with the ESSER funds, those things are, in total, those are the pieces that unfortunately are slated for, those would be future cuts.
So thanks. I just, my memory in how these funds get spent could be different. It could get switched here or there, but I remember a past board did not use ESSER funds for this. This was out of our fund balance strategic investments for those high schools. So maybe it got switched into ESSER as Michelle's nodding. So those investments went into some of the ESSER funds, it sounds like. Okay, thank you.
Director Simon, I think you're reading my mind, so we'll move on to the next slide here just to give it some added context. At our work session on September 8th, we came forward with what we called considerations. We weren't recommending options or making recommendations, but just an initial set of considerations for board discussion on the initial front end of this process. So what you see on the left side of this slide are the positions that were initially funded with pandemic relief funds totaling $8.6 million. So there was a consideration at least to eliminate these positions originally funded with those temporary pandemic relief funds we knew would end. And that was clear to all districts when those were allocated during the pandemic. In that initial list here, what you can see is, and I won't go through them all in detail because we did that last time, but you see literacy intervention teachers at the elementary, high school academic support staff, middle school instructional coaches and paraeducators, and then some staff in the student support areas with social workers, counselors, and really some additions to assistant principals from 10 to 12 months. So the discussion, well, just to kind of back up here just for a moment, on the right side of that slide, what you see is some additional considerations we brought forward through some of the initial conversations with our school principals. So that ranges on that right side from the middle school model schedule change, staffing adjustments to reducing FTE or staffing allocations at the middle or elementary, middle, and high school levels, potential K-12 coaching and intervention model restructure, and additional administrative positions at the school level, which really means our administrative support model that was put in place, probably back in 2017 or 18, looking at Michelle, probably right around that window of time, that took into consideration administration and administrators, administrative interns, social workers, and counselors. So we put some estimates there around what was possible or could be considered as either additions or options that could be interchangeable with some of the things on the left. And really what came out of that discussion for our team, based on your discussions with each other, was some clear themes. So and those key themes were, from the board, a real focus to minimize impact on literacy, to minimize impact on class size, to do our best to minimize our impact on student behavior and academic intervention roles, and if we can, provide our schools with some flexibility in their staffing wherever we can. So from that discussion, really what we see on the next slide is just an option that tried to take those themes into consideration. An additional option, which we'll get to in a moment, was created option number 2. We went back to work with our principals to create option 2. Option 1 is take some of those things that the board prioritized at the last work session off the table. So this is an option. It keeps the remaining ESSER's positions at the top on kind of item 1 there, and then slides in some of those options or considerations from the second column we just looked at, meaning the coaching model restructure, the administrative positions, at the site level. And then what we've added here is an additional $400,000 at the central office around professional development and supplies and material reductions to be able to get to that $8 million target. So again, that's one way to get to that $8 million target. So again, I just want to stress, we took off the non-literacy intervention and academic supports. So that top line there of 4.6 was 8.6, but taking away the elementary literacy support is about a $4 million, took that piece off of this particular option. Moving on to,
We have a quick question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Director Simon?
Thanks, Corey. I thought it'd be good to ask
Yeah,
as
thanks
you
for
go through it,
jumping in.
if that's okay. So the number one there with the ESSER positions, non-literacy and academic support. So this would be able to, I won't say maintain as is, but maintain flexibilities for high schools on those programs that they've found so successful to help with, I'll say student disruption, but just students in general to create a better environment. Is that better, safer and learning environment in schools? Is that fair?
Yeah, what the high schools would do is what the staffing allocation that they would get, and I'm looking to Annette to verify for me here, they would, use the FTE allocation and make those decisions on, you've heard efforts, they want to maintain those supports where they can, and so they would carve that out of the allocations that they would have, knowing that across our high schools, for example, there's 14 fewer, in this option, 14 fewer employees when it comes to support roles. So I'll kind of look to Annette to see if you want to add anything to that through the conversations with our high school principals.
Yeah, I think we would, within that restructure of the K-12 coaching model, that would be our goal would be to look at that and look at K-12, how we can make the structures better for all of our learners across the entire system. So it would be a collaborative effort between Dr. Gustafson, myself, and our principals at all the levels.
All right, so I'm not sure if I understood all of that, so I'm just going to put in kind of my high-level thing. So this does maintain at least some flexibilities for high schools to continue things they found successful. Maybe not at the current level, but at least gives them some flexibility. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay, thank you.
And maybe to take that a step further, if you move on, team, to the next slide, this just provides a little more detail what if those remaining, if you take the elementary literacy intervention teachers off, as the board wanted that theme to happen, then here's the remaining pieces. And that, I'll just give you a chance to highlight anything that you wanted to point out here.
Yeah, I think that this answers the question that Director Simon brought forward about the pieces that he had brought forward about the Blaine, reroute center, things that you saw at Coon Rapids Middle and High School. So that's that first part about academic support. Those are the intervention teachers that you saw at the high school while maintaining intervention classes like you see that we have for readings and math support. The middle school instructional coaches, those are eliminating those coaching intervention supports at the middle level. The paraeducators, those are the safe space behavioral support rooms that we have at all of the middle school sites. And then the last part you can see is within that K-12 social workers and student support. That's how that total support piece is lost with the coaching and support. So it's kind of in little buckets here and there. When you add it all up, that's where all of that FTE is found.
So really what this option does is, it's an option, it's not our recommended option right now. But because of the nature of those ESSER positions, it's an option because those were meant to be short-term, and we knew those dollars would not continue. And it eliminates the remainder while keeping those elementary literacy positions. It does, as you saw in the strategic investments, it adds additional cuts to the high school and middle school level on top of those strategic investments. So I think it was well stated before, we'd have to rework those support models within the remaining FTE. So there's a different kind of impact there when you lay this on top of the strategic investments that were already decided on. So I see a question here. I'm going to pause.
Director Langenfeld?
So just to be clear, when were the strategic investments when did they come in to the district, do you know?
This is year 3.
Yeah.
This is year 3, and it was a 5-year plan?
4.
A 4-year plan, okay. So that was that piece, and that was prior to the pandemic, correct?
It was after.
After the pandemic. And so all of these positions and dollars, just for clarity for me and for anybody else that isn't clear, these positions did not exist prior
That is
to
accurate.
March of 2020 and after. They
That's
came after.
Yeah, and I think it's an important question, so maybe add to that. The board at the time took money that was in the general fund and in our fund balance, and said, we're going to set that aside and use it for that time-bound purpose, for basically a bridge through those challenges that come in post-pandemic, knowing that they would end, right? That was the intent at the time. Knowing that we go through that annual budget process, but that was the intent, like other strategic investments have happened over the years, probably over the decades. I'm looking at Michelle. Over time, we've had different ones from time to time. So I'm coming back to the key themes of really staying focused on literacy, class size, academic behavior support, and then that flexibility wherever we can. And we will have Ginger talk about the process that after that, those themes really rose to the top from our work session. We went back with our school principals to continue to do some realignment to those themes. So, go ahead.
Thank you, Superintendent McIntyre. So as we continue our work with our K-12 leaders, our focus continues to be on our vision, our mission, our core values, and our strategic priorities, as well as being proactive and also responsive. And so as we continue to work with our leaders, one of the things that we had done as we're continuing this process is we pulled in our K-12 leaders after the last school board work session, and we walked through what the themes were, and then we began to really drill in and dial in on what our K-12 recommendation would be to bring forward. You'll see that our focus is on literacy. That is a pillar. Minimizing class size, that is a pillar of ours. Also, restructuring our K-12 coaching and intervention model, really using a continuous improvement model in looking at that. Addressing the reductions at the secondary level, as you just heard. And really looking at defining our roles of coaching and intervention and what do those mean? Because as we found over the years, things evolve. So this is going to give us a great opportunity as leaders to really define those, review those, and refine those supports by level as well. Also, as we are also looking at preparing potentially for reviewing the middle school model as well. And then also clarifying current roles and responsibilities. Again, this is it's a continuous improvement approach that we will continue to take. Again, being responsive and also proactive at the same time. And again, keeping in mind our strategic priorities of safe, welcoming environment, increased student achievement, and effective organizational support.
And board members, what I would add to that, so for extensive sessions and follow-up sessions leading up to this meeting tonight, and that collaborative approach with our building leaders, the goal is to really ensure that any reductions we're looking at those with their help, with a deep understanding of the impact on students and staff. And we're really moving through this process on these difficult decisions together. Also trying to be, as fair as we can with a large district. It's a challenge when you look at the needs of different levels and what feels like that's fair to each level. And how can we, with their help, bring information to the board to help you be as informed as possible? The other piece I would just mention that with the principals having a stronger hand in the budget reduction plan, and their depth of knowledge on the rationale behind whatever happens in the final decision is, really important to help communicate and implement in their own unique school communities at their sites. So their ability to be stronger allies in the process and helping us manage expectations and ensure that the focus remains on that collective mission that was reviewed again really is the important elements of this process at this point. So what I'm going to get into is,
We have
again.
a quick question.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Director Audette?
Thank you, Superintendent McIntyre. I just had a question on the scope of what they were, when our principals looked at this, what was the scope of what they were able to look at for cuts? And what I mean, was it the whole 420 of the whole 420 million in the unassigned balance, or was it a subset of that?
Basically, we asked them to look at their roles and their levels and what would they bring forward. It was
So it
open
was
for them to bring forward.
That's like 275 million roughly
Yeah.
from the PK-12. So their scope was limited to that.
We have to talk through we've done it many times with the board. If there's a restricted area, we got to look at what are the rules around that. So we unpacked, if there was like special education, for example, we
Yep.
all know you get 25 cents on the dollar, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and making sure we're in compliance. So if certain things were discussed, we had to bring in those added considerations.
No,
But
that's
we
good.
simply asked them, where would you start?
Yeah.
Where would you begin? What's most valuable to you, and where would you see opportunities for reductions?
Although inside the PK-12 umbrella.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I'm looking at my team to verify that for me, right? Because we've had lots of conversations. Yeah. Okay, so what you see here, moving on to the next slide, is really a summary of that collective work in our effort to get to that $8 million target. So you'll see different elements of this, starting, there's no particular order here. It's just kind of how we organized it for the board. It's not a necessarily prioritized order. But the opportunity for us to rethink our technology support redesign model, our ability to rethink our engagement coaches at the elementary level. You can see those top two items there in the descriptions. The high school staffing piece, so this is taking into consideration flexibility in our staffing allocation when we know we have students who we do count towards our staffing ratio, or our allocation ratio, but may leave our campus for PSEO, or maybe participating in a different program. And how can we maintain those staffing allocations? And those have been included in the past, so that would take these out, and our team can talk more about that, keeping us within within that same allocation and finding some savings. Then this next piece here is, it's a kind of an extension of that ESSERS discussion we had earlier, but this is really looking at our administrative interns model and those other supports and finding some reductions within that administrative staffing model that I was referring to earlier, that was put in motion in 2017. If you go on to the following page, what you see here is on top of the 14 million that we've already done centrally, finding another $700,000 here to work through what additional services and staffing that we would need to flush out, and we're not at a point to share exact details, similar to last year. Last year at this time in September, we have a lot of work to drill this in, and then eventually have an opportunity to talk to those employees that would be affected by it. So we think we can have some additional savings here that we'll be able to give you more detail on by the next board meeting. Also looking at our special education workload model, that's really our staffing model with the fluid child count numbers that we see in different areas of the program. We believe we can find some savings there that will realign our staffing models to where the needs are showing up within the different disability categories. What you also see here then is $300,000 of reductions in professional development and supplies and materials. And then finally, the middle school model that we've talked about previously, which again is a model that would maintain class size. You can see the key themes here: increase instructional minutes in a 6-period day, reduces those student transitions. It actually aligns the amount of instructional time with the elementary and high school schedules. And we would go through a process of doing our best to maintain as many elective offerings as we can, because we know we had some new challenges with requirements around Phy-Ed and art. So we would have more work to do in this area, but this list gets us to 8.2 million and really is intended to meet the themes that the board talked about at the last work session around maintain as much class size, minimize any impact that we can there, maintain our literacy supports to the highest level we can, and then also give some flexibility within the staffing allocations to the buildings. So the option 2 really tries to hit those themes in a stronger way than option 1 does. We still have work to do around the issue of electives, but it kind of looks at that in relation to the core academic areas that this board has talked about keeping front and center with students. So if you move on to the next slide, Jim, please. That's just kind of the summary of everything here, and I just want to kind of wrap up with some reflections on what we're trying to do here. So, I talked about trying to avoid those deep cuts to literacy in those academic supports, and also honor the board's desire to minimize that impact on class size. We looked at this takes away fewer staff from many of those behavior and academic intervention positions that are in those ESSER areas. That does do some restructuring in the special education area, and it really looks at how can we move forward with navigating a budget that tries to keep those key themes that the board talked about last time at the center. We're going to get feedback on that throughout our community meetings and through board members, through you as well, starting tonight. And, as we move through the coming weeks, we'll still have opportunities to make adjustments here. So I think that the challenge, and we went through it last time, with a large system, to find reductions that make the most sense with 8,000 employees, and, we saw representatives of our 3,500 teachers. That's a large challenge. We understand that a lot of times every member of our community, from our staff, teachers, on all of our staff, our students and their families, there's strong opinions about what's most valuable and what should be protected. And you're I'm sure, hearing already, just like you did through phase 2, a range of desired outcomes. That's a natural human response as people advocate for the programs and positions that maybe directly impact their lives or their work or their experience. So that's an incredible challenge, right? It's a big responsibility to look and listen to those individual perspectives, and at the same time and do our best to find what's in the best interest of the entire district. So this board has always been strong at showing your gratitude and how much you value the input of our community. And there's so many things that people do value and hold close in high regard in our district. And our roles require us to analyze that broader financial landscape and make the decisions that ensure our long-term financial health and the integrity of those core operational areas. So we listen closely to those specific examples and remain focused on the bigger picture with those difficult choices that we must make that we don't take lightly about prioritizing and making sure we're not trying to prioritize one group's needs over another, right? That's really the challenge that we go through. We felt that through phase 2. But this does require us to prioritize our core academic services, protect class size where possible, and strategically reallocate resources to support the fundamental mission of the district. hopefully throughout this early phases of the process, you've seen our team work hard, our extended team with our building principals, guided by the data that we have available, our strategic plan, and how do we stay focused on those core fundamental areas that the board has really felt needs to be the priority as they show up in our 3 strategic priorities. So with that, Co-Chair DeShane, I'll turn it back over to you to facilitate kind of discussion.
Thank you so much for the presentation and all the information. Board members, what conversation topics do you have to raise? Questions or comments for the presenters? Director Hoekman.
Yeah, I have a question about in option 2. It says high school staffing, reallocation of staffing based on student choice. That's 1.8 million. Looking at option 1, there is high school staffing, 14.2 FTE is 1.13 million. And so we're saying just by looking at efficiencies, we can reduce something more than 15 teachers from high schools without affecting class sizes?
Yeah, so I'll start with, and Annette, you can jump right in. So this is the effect of how do we count our PSEO enrollments, right? Those have been counted in the staffing allocations, knowing that the students that take advantage of those offerings outside of our schools aren't in class, but they've been counted in the past as part of those staffing allocations. So if you take a look at students who, and we Michelle and Annette can talk more about the analysis. Maybe I'll just pause there and let you explain that a little bit further. This is a very good question, and I'm glad you raised it. I don't know who wants to start.
I can start. This goes back to a comment that Director Audette made about the PSEO adjustment and looking at that. We do direct contracts with North Hennepin and Anoka-Ramsey, so those ones are a little easier to look at. Those ones I can tell based on credits that are taken in that. So I did an analysis based on the credits that we have. So we did, last year, over 18,000 credits between Anoka-Ramsey and North Hennepin. Calculating that out into average daily membership, that's about 674 average days. So students, that would be full-time students. So we're overstaffing for 674 students on average. That divided by 29, our 29-to-1 staffing model is 23.25 FTE. So if you were to just adjust for that portion of the PSEO, we also have students that are going to other colleges, and those are direct pay by Minnesota Department of Education to the colleges. We don't have contracts with those, so those are a little, for me to see, to break that down quickly, how many are going there. So it's a conservative estimate technically of the kids taking PSEO, just using our 2 heavy contracts that we have with our 2 community school colleges within our boundaries. So that was the calculation that was done. That's correct.
Okay. Annette doesn't have much to add to that, so,
She's got that.
yeah.
Co-Chair Arco.
Do you think it's likely that that number of PSEO students is about the same every year, or, because this was just for 1 year, it sounds like?
It's been continuously growing.
Continuously growing, okay.
It has been and like I said, it doesn't include University of Minnesota, Bethel, Northwestern, some other schools that are heavily used also, not to the extent that are the ones that are right in our backyard, but again, to say that it's a conservative estimate because we're not counting, I wasn't able to do that in the data that I have right now from that standpoint.
Thank you.
Director Simon.
Thanks, Casey. Thanks for the presentation. I've got a few, so I'm going to jump around a little bit. And this is just, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but just for all of us. So if the target is now $8 million, Michelle confirmed that that would put our fund balance just under 10%, depending. We'll see what
Based on
happens, but
everything, yep.
that's the estimate. And that 8 million is based upon, right now we're in contract negotiations. This isn't a negotiation discussion, but we're in contract negotiations and we have a budgeted amount for those contract negotiations. So that is with us settling those contracts at the budgeted amount, right? So any amount over the current budget that the board has set would potentially, wouldn't potentially, it would increase the cut target, right? I mean, unless we
It
wanted to.
increases the deficit, so.
Increases the deficit, that's a
Increases the
better way to
deficit,
put it,
yes.
yeah. And utilizing fund balance it's a one-time thing. I mean, we don't get that money over again. So if you use that in negotiations, it goes away and creates a deficit going forward. Is that fair?
Yep, unless
Okay.
it's used for one-time payments, right?
So just something to think about as we think about budget cuts in the midst of negotiations too, and what that means. And then I want to go to, I'm not expecting answers to this tonight, but I think it'd be important as we talk to the public about what these options are and what they mean. So the middle school schedule change going from 7-period to a 6-period day means a lot of things, right? So at least Anoka-Hennepin has always been very heavy elective, right? So our students get the opportunity to follow their passions and many opportunities to do that. This would impact that. So I just think bringing that forward to the community to let them know what the actual details are, like, you know, what does that mean for music and art and these other electives, especially since the state has increased the required electives, like in Phi Ed, for example, that middle schoolers have to take. So I think it would be important to really detail that out in those community meetings and let our community know what that means for our middle schools if this board and the district goes with that option. Beyond students taking electives, it means other things too. It means the teacher prep model. Right now, they teach 5 out of 7. Would they teach 6 out of 7? What would those minutes go? In that one of those hours that they don't teach, they cover a duty, like a lunch duty or things like that, a hall duty, or maybe we talked about helping students, right? So intervention teachers, that's a duty also. So it would mean different things for our middle school. So I think it's important to know that also. And then, at least for me, I have heard and I have seen the positive impacts it makes in our schools to have that flexibility for the schools to do what they feel they need to do for students, right? For student safety, student redirects, and things like that. Not only for those students specifically, serving them better, it serves the classroom better too, because the classroom is a place that isn't as disrupted, right? So that's at least important for me. I think that's it. So thank you very much.
Director Audette and then Director Lingenfeld.
Thank you. I'll probably move around a little bit as well. I think the first is just an observation for myself, which is after we went from thinking we had to cut 16 million down to 8, what I noticed is that the majority of the cuts that we're considering have now moved into the realm of the K-12, so that I'm going to refer to that as the $275 million bucket that we have listed under the 26 general fund for unassigned pre-K-12 programs. So it's like we moved to, that's where the cuts are going to come from, kind of fast. I think what I'm saying is if we were cutting $16 million, I think we'd certainly be looking in there, but we would be looking across the bigger pool. So the whole $420 million in the unassigned, which would include the other unassigned categories, which if I calculate it right, it's roughly $145 million. So the sum, the 275 and the 145, they come together to be 420. So the options we're presented with basically say, well, you can choose option 1 or option 2. We recommend option 2, but in my opinion, we still have not done an adequate review of what I'm going to call the 145, which is that unassigned coming out of operations, central services, and what we've termed unassigned other. And I'm going back to what I've discussed a half a dozen times, I think, in the past year, which was, it's a concept that I don't really know why we've rejected it. I heard at some point it's not possible to do it, zero-based budget. I'm just going to explain that a little more. Whether it's zero-based budget or not, I'm not necessarily sure I care, but the concept is we take things from these other buckets and we explain them in enough detail so that a person such as myself, who's a director on the school board, can clearly understand what it is we're getting from the position and how we assess its value and how we know that it's worthwhile. And I say that because we're talking about making cuts inside of that PK-12 umbrella, which is, since we're school, it's clearly a highly valuable area. So I would like to be in a position as a board member where I could say to anybody who asks me, oh yes, I know what's in that $145 million bucket. We've had an opportunity to review it in great detail, and I'm certain there's nothing there that can be cut. That's why it makes sense to take $8 million out of schools. Because I know for a fact, because I've seen it, and I've been satisfied for my own interest that it has happened. And the reality is, because we haven't done that, there's no way that I could make that statement. And I've been asked this a number of times by people. How do we know that there's not more to be cut? And my answer has to be, I don't know. I can't say for sure that there's not. I've been told there's not. I would like to see it in that details. I would like to go through those details before we make these super important decisions so that we could say, so that I could be in a position to say, yep, I'm satisfied for my own interest that it could be done. So why is that important? If we look at just our most recent levy that we reauthorized, which I think was about a $31 million issue, we definitely advertised in there that maintaining instruction, among other things, was a rationale for its passage. So we committed to the community. The reason we want to do this levy, we want to renew it, is so that we can maintain programs in the classroom. And meanwhile, while all that was going on, as the budget was growing, there were also increases in the, what I'm calling the other category, the $145 million area. We didn't get the chance to review them all individually as it happened, but they definitely happened. And I do not think that we can't raise admin, central services, and other costs, not explain how those expenditures are justified, and then use the fact that they've gone up to come in and steal effectively out of our classrooms, out of the other area. After we made that promise that we did that levy in order to maintain those classrooms. And that's what I feel, without being able to see it and understand it, I feel that's at risk, and it's a serious concern. In addition to that, the middle school model change, I have a lot of concerns with it. We talked about this at length, I think about a little over a year ago. My recollection of it was the board rejected it. And in fact, at the end of the last meeting, it was up on the board, and we even went over it and said that had been considered off limits. So I was pretty surprised last Friday to see that back in here as an option. Like Mr. Simon, I would like for us to detail exactly what we should expect we're going to lose as a result of those of that change. Last time, I know we talked about sixth grade ELA instruction, which was currently 2 periods. That would be reduced to 1, so that's a pretty serious one. And then the part about electives, which I think will have a devastating impact to our arts and music programs, because it'll seriously reduce the number of options kids have to choose. So whereas today a student can choose both to do some of the arts and to do some of the other electives, in the future they'll have to choose one or the other. And the impact of that will have a long tail, because if we have less kids coming through our music programs in middle school, that'll just really have a serious impact on our high school programs. And we've got a super long history in our district of strong programs there. And so in my mind, that's not a good option. It wasn't a good option when we looked at it before, but I definitely think we owe it to people to go back in and dust those discussions off and make sure they know what's on the table. So, thank you.
Director Lingenfeld.
I too appreciate all of this important conversation as we look forward. From the middle school perspective, having served in that level, I think it's really important that we understand what the latest statute changes were. So I know we added art and physical education, which really changed the model that we had actually looked at last year, so, or whenever we looked at that. So that's why I think it's really important that we all have clarity around that, so that we can understand, because it did reduce elective options at that time, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't know that we ever saw what that looked like as an end result as a board. I'm quite sure we didn't. The other piece is what's important. Again, I go back to the priorities and always looking for efficiencies wherever they can be found. So as we look to the priorities around literacy, and we have been working that as a really shared priority among all of us and a top priority along with behavior, really looking to see that we have a full comprehensive approach. And I think that's really important, that whole K-12 piece. So as we look to what these positions are, I think it's vitally important that our principals have those conversations and really help define what they are. And I want to, if we can, have the impact. And I think those impacts matter. And I know that some principals have shared with me not only the anecdotal impact, but the hard data, the qualitative and quantitative story. So if there are any things like that that we could have to support the impact of the work, that would be really important. Again, as we look forward, I also want to be sure that we afford principals as much flexibility as possible. I know that we have positions in some schools that are used differently, and when I say that, they may have more of X and fewer of Y because that works best for their schools. And I would also offer that if there's any innovative programs, and I think of Director Simon, if there are some things that people are looking at to pilot or are currently piloting, that we make sure that they can, if they've collected the data. And I know that the pilot at Coon Rapids Middle that Director Simon supported and brought into the group to us has really been a very successful model. So again, the reroute rooms and all of those important things. And, when you have a principal share with you that their coach has really elevated the teaching ranks of their schools and their ability to deliver high-quality instruction, and has been just a game changer for the school, and you can see it in their school data. That's important for us too, because these are very hard decisions. But I would also offer, if there are things in those areas that have not been looked at, to take another look through those to see if there's anything in there. Because the more we can keep in our schools and in front of our kids in support of our children is, I think, a shared priority that we all want and expect the best we can, and to make sure that we have the voices of the leaders in our schools.
Director Audette.
Thanks. I forgot. I had one other question that I think is just going to require somebody to do a little research. But with respect to Q-Comp, I'm interested in understanding the contractual responsibilities or obligations of that program, because I believe there are some. And And so I would like to understand that better, too. I think there's something like, I think I saw roughly 20 positions in there that go to administer that program, and so I'm curious about that.
Probably can provide you some of that right now. So that's funding from the state, and that is also, that program has to be agreed to by the union. So those are restricted funds.
Well, I would say Dr. Langenfeld actually wrote our plan before she left for Green Bay and intimately knows it, but yes, it is required. When we applied for it, it is agreement between the teachers union and administration for the job embedded professional development. So the number of QComp evaluators is part of that plan. And that, I think they're about 26, like you said, 26 FTE that are basically going out and evaluating all of our teachers as part of that plan.
We
And it's-
can provide the whole board the details behind all that, but I think that's the,
Yeah. It's
yeah.
additional funding that we get, that if we didn't have the plan, we wouldn't get the funding. It's not something you can move somewhere else. There was only so much funding available at the state level that once it reached that level for districts, other districts don't get that money. So we are one of the QComp districts that allows us to have that additional funding, to have those evaluators, and then there's the performance increments that go to teachers. And it was a big part of negotiations several years ago, settling a contract, to be honest.
Thanks.
Director Hoekman?
Thank you. So much here to look at and make certain that we are giving our students the best opportunities, make certain that academics is the priority. And some of the things brought forth here are really, we're getting closer to that, to putting the priority, as you mentioned. You heard that we were talking about minimizing effects on literacy, making certain that that is a priority, minimizing classroom changes, that's a priority, keeping the staffing constant and giving those opportunities for teachers to interact with their students, and then, of course, making certain that safety. So I'm glad that those things came through and that we are keeping those at the forefront so that we can ensure our kids get those opportunities, because we know sadly test scores are trending down, and we need to find ways to work through the system to make certain that our programming is finding ways to increase those learning outcomes. So just as we look through this, we also mentioned we want to get the input from the public and make certain that we're hearing from everyone at those upcoming meetings. So it is good for people to make their voices heard. I also want to remember that we are the representatives of the public, and so working well together to make certain that we prioritize that student learning is really important. And so I'm grateful that our messages are being heard, that we are prioritizing those student interactions. And the process really is short, so I don't know how much the public knows. We really only started as a board looking at these numbers a month ago. And there's been a lot of information. You put forward, Superintendent, that there were like 80 slides on the presentation that we had a month ago. We all separately had a meeting where we were given 80 slides of information, which is quite overwhelming. And it's positive to see things like, we found out some efficiencies that we could have in our high schools because of those PSEO counting numbers. So grateful that we're digging into it, because I think that when we work together and that the board has the opportunity to see some of these things, that things get better, that we can find some efficiencies. And that's really what this is about, keeping the cuts away from the classroom, prioritizing those students, and finding some of these things. So I agree, we don't want to probably start by looking at any rash changes to perhaps our middle school program and just saying this would be a great efficiency. It makes it simple. Let's make certain that the decisions that we're making do start from the bottom. I like the idea of starting, if we could have done some zero-based, start with those priorities. We're not doing that, unfortunately, but I think we're getting closer to finding some things. With that, I just want to make certain that some things that we say about being fair and having flexibility, let's make certain that those things also continue to prioritize our students, that across the board, if people in one building are finding something that is particularly useful, it probably should be used in all of our buildings. So we don't want to just silo things too much to say, oh, let's just let everyone be flexible, and rather look at the system, make certain that we're putting students above those systems and making wise choices with these decisions.
Thank you. Co-Chair Arco.
I appreciate all the comments and input from board members. I just want to agree with a couple of the sentiments. I think one of Anoka-Hennepin's strengths is the kind of electives and the choices that we offer. So I'm not in favor of doing the middle school schedule change. And then I would like to see, kind of as Director Audette was saying, just an option that, as much as is possible, doesn't touch the classrooms, the classroom teachers, and kind of justifies how that's possible.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple things that I wanted to add into the conversation as we're having it here today. I think there's been several mentions of the large appendix information that has all of kind of that detailed information, and it does go sort of section by section of the budget. Some of the unrestricted spaces like the operations, the central office, and the other buckets start on page 26, I believe, of that appendix L. So if anybody wants to take a look at that in detail, but it talks about like exactly what type of transportation, is it special ed transportation, charter transportation, it gives us some very specific categories and details that we can look at and use as board members to help us understand what is in each of those spaces and kind of how much it makes up of the total amount that's available for consideration in these discussions. I think with that, another point that really stood out to me that I don't think has been acknowledged yet is that the central office and the district-wide teams took the first $14 million of cuts. And through this process and through the investigation and the discussions that you all have been having, you're putting another, I think it's $700,000 into that, into cuts from the spaces that have already taken a huge majority of the cuts. And I think if I'm correct on this, that area of our district makes up less than 10% of the total budget overall, which it's a bit imbalanced, but I think that demonstrates the commitment that the team has to prioritizing what is happening in our classrooms, what's happening in our buildings for students, and trying every chance we get to do that. That's another reason for this phased approach, right? We wanted to have the opportunity to have more time and more input at each stage. Instead of the out-the-gate phase one, 30 million that we thought we had to do, we decided that it was more sound and strategic to take bite-sized chunks of these cuts. And while that feels painful because we keep coming back to these discussions, it has allowed us to kind of narrow the focus, have all of the information available to us, and see what happens, right? The inputs of what is our enrollment at. The sad truth is that we're sort of having a double whammy of inflation hitting our staff and teachers and the difficult position that puts all of us as individuals in our own lives, plus the inflationary costs to run a district, the increase in transportation costs, the increase in supplies, just all around the increased costs, coupled with flat enrollment. And we know from the tax levy presentation that we had that enrollment drives the revenue piece of this discussion. And if it stays flat while all the other costs are rising, we get this imbalance that's happening right now. I think that there are some excellent questions being raised and excellent discussions happening around the board table. I think that the frequent conversations that we're having, the preliminary discussions, the additional information, the opportunity for all of us as board members to talk to each of you as we have questions and further educate ourselves and learn more is contributing to a really healthy discussion and process, and I really hope to see that continued and that collaborative discussion back and forth so that we can keep learning from one another and from the experts in our space. You all did that without us, right, by including building leaders, I'm certain that that was difficult for everybody involved. That this is hard for us. It's very hard for all of you that are going to be living with the choices that are made as a part of these budget discussions. So thank you for leaning into that work and working with one another and, you know, seeing it as an opportunity maybe to learn across the K-12 system how things are working, where maybe we didn't have the chance or the opportunity to do that in the past. I think the last piece that I just want to hit on, and Director Hoekman prioritized this as well in her comments, are the importance of those community discussions. I know as a board, we have all prioritized having those available to the public in spaces that are close to where people live, and also on multiple different evenings so that other scheduling impacts can be taken into consideration. So find the scheduled event that works best for you. You don't have to go to the one that's in your community. You can go to any of these that work in your schedule. We really value hearing from you and getting input from you. I know the district will have a survey option. I don't know if that was mentioned yet, that people who are unable to attend the meeting will still be able to raise their voice and their perspectives via survey. I know last time the board took that very seriously. We got all the comments and information aggregated for us from our communications department, so I look forward to seeing that again. Thank you so much for the presentation. Superintendent McIntyre.
Yeah, and thank you. Just before we move on, I'd like to clarify a couple of things. I've heard a couple of times tonight about something about additional costs for administration, and I can be crystal clear with all of our audience. We cut $14 million. We hit $1.2 million at the central office and the administration team restructure. That is all, that nothing was added. I don't know where that's coming from. What was remaining was done in a budget neutral approach, okay? So we hit our $14 million target, and then from there, reworked the process and the different positions. So happy to share that information with anybody who wants it, because I don't think that's a fair narrative. And then, you know, I didn't come forward with additional central office cuts because I don't believe we can withstand it. 250 positions were impacted by that. To bring any more at this point in time, it just falls back in the schools. So we looked at that closely. We did find another $700,000, which was very, very painful. And that's why I don't have it in my recommendations. Now, if the board directs me to do that, we will go deeper, and it won't be my recommendation, but we'll bring it to you. Because the board last time asked me for my recommendation, right? And you have a number of options and considerations here to kind of lean on. Lastly, we didn't take the thought of the middle school schedule lightly. That was a way to protect class size and stay focused on core academic areas. Otherwise, without the middle school schedule, we're looking at, and our principals told us, keep our coaches, keep our intervention specialists, especially in literacy and math. They were crystal clear on that. So that was another reason why we leaned towards the middle school schedule change. Otherwise, it's an FTE staffing allocation challenge. Because and you asked about the central office percentage. I think you saw earlier in the slides, it's 3.4%, not 10. Way less. Yeah. So we're running really, really lean, and we would do more if we could, because we are with you on protecting the direct services to the classrooms. We know every school district, the magic's in the classroom, but we were lean before we started phase 1 and 2. So continue to raise those questions so we can answer them. So I love how Director Hoekman said it, we can continue to dial in where there might be agreement and consensus as we move through the coming weeks. So I appreciate all that, and we'll take the feedback from tonight back to our team, to our principals, and continue to try to, narrow that funnel down to what is ultimately some tough, choices to make, right, for everyone involved. So thank you, board members, for the feedback tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. All right, board, our next agenda item is a labor relations update, item 9A. We would welcome Dr. Cherry, Chief Human Resources Officer. Thank you.
Good evening, board. This evening, I have a labor relations update, as I have for think, every business meeting for about the last couple of years as we are active in open contract negotiations. We do this in alignment with our policy 209, negotiation code of ethics. This is where we review the status of negotiations at our public school board meetings. This is for your information as well as the community, so you understand where we're at in the process. Consistent with open meeting law and our Public Employee Labor Relations Act, we do reserve detailed negotiation discussions where we talk about negotiation strategy in closed session with the school board. So this evening, I do have a little bit of additional information for you to really understand our goals in bargaining. When we are negotiating employment contracts, we focus strongly on a collaborative bargaining process. We focus on finding mutual gains between the district and our employee groups, work very hard on solving shared problems. So when we come to the table in our negotiation meetings, we start with what are the issues that we're trying to solve and come to a collaborative decision or a collaborative bargaining process. When we focus on our bargaining, we do ensure that our agreement is legally sound and operationally manageable with clear and concise language. We find that clear and concise language is helpful in carrying out those contracts so that our employees understand what we have agreed to. We focus on recruitment and retention of high-quality staff in all of our bargaining goals, whether that is language items that can help understand the working conditions, the terms of agreement, as well as the financial factors. And finally, we always are attentive to being fiscally responsible stewards of our taxpayer money. We do operate within a fixed budget, and any contract agreement, we need to ensure that we are meeting our budget expectations. And so with budget proposals, negotiation proposals, we not only pay attention to the term of the contract and what that costs in the given year of the contract, but any of those agreements that may have tails, meaning that they are continue to increase in perpetuity. Information about our employee groups and background information. We do have 5 unaffiliated groups. We call these policy groups that are not bargaining groups. And then we have 13 collective bargaining groups. One of those has a 2-year contract that has already been settled. That's our community school coordinators for the 25-27 contract agreement period. 4 of those groups have 2-year contracts and are currently in the 2nd year of their 2-year contracts, and 8 of those groups are currently open, and I will provide an update on these 8 groups next. Before we get into that, I do want to provide some information about our budget. We talked about that a lot tonight, and so this is just a high-level overview. About 82% of our salaries and benefits make up the general fund budget. So when we really look at what's in the general fund, we are mostly funding our employees. About 1% of increase on salaries and benefits is equal to about $5.3 million. And a 1% increase on the basic general ed formula is equal to $3 million. That's important to note because as we look at increases to our general ed formula, they're not proportional to what it costs us to pay our same employees that same percentage amount. When we look at FY26, our current year's budget includes a 2.5% increase in salaries and a 5% increase in benefits. And then, as you heard recently, we are still building the FY27 budget. Looking at our groups with open contracts, we have our building service employees who are represented by SEIU Local 284. This group includes approximately 200 employees, custodial, warehouse, and maintenance and grounds employees. We have met several times with this group, and after our last meeting, we did file for mediation with this group. We have worked through most of our language items and are very far apart in our financials. We do start mediation. We have a mediator assigned to us from the Bureau of Mediation Services, and we meet for the first time in mediation on September 25th, this Thursday. Our other group with very active negotiations is our teachers. This includes our K-12 teachers as well as our ABE teachers, our ECFE teachers, and our preschool teachers. Those are our teachers that are in community ed programs. Our teachers are represented by Anoka-Hennepin Education Minnesota. There are approximately 3,200, almost 3,300 employees in this group. We have met several times, and we have come to several tentative agreements on language items. And at this time, our big sticking point, again, is the financials. We are going to mediation and are currently actively working on scheduling our first mediation date. Looking at our next group with open contracts, here are 3 groups of employees that we have met with for the first time and have begun to discuss open issues. This includes our child nutrition assistants, our principals, and our technical specialists. We will meet for the second time with our child nutrition assistants on October 7th. Continuing to meet with our principals. Next meeting is scheduled on October 7th. And our technical specialists, we had October 16th as the second date, and we just had to reschedule that. So that is a little bit further out, but in the very near future. And then we also have 3 additional groups with open contracts that we have yet to schedule our first meetings with. Our community school programmers and early childhood screeners have just switched the name of their exclusive representative and are now represented by Anoka-Hennepin Education Minnesota. There are 9 employees in this group. We typically wait to begin meeting with this group until after the teachers have settled because they are also represented by Education Minnesota. Our school office supervisors, about 42 employees here. We have yet to schedule our first meeting. And our special education administrators, there are 15 employees in this group. These 2 groups are school office supervisors and our special education administrators. Will begin to get them scheduled as soon as we have time available. And with that, the next steps that we have is we will continue to provide regular updates at school board meetings. The information that you'll receive about the groups that are in mediation will be limited until we arrive at a place of a ratified agreement by those groups. When we are in mediation, those meetings are closed to the public, and all proposals that are exchanged in mediation are confidential. We will, however, continue to update the information that we have available on our negotiations webpage. And with that, I'm open to any comments or questions the board may have.
Thank you for the presentation. Members, any questions? No? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, board, we're nearing our last agenda item for this session. Item 10, board correspondence and communications. Members, this is your opportunity to share happenings in your community, report on committee assignments, or any other items of interest. Does anyone have anything to share? Director Langenfeld.
Just as we look forward, the AMSD is already scheduling Day at the Capitol, and it's not until April, but I think it's really important as we have a shared priority and platform to certainly, it's our responsibility collectively, obviously, and we've all taken steps to reach out to legislators and communicate with our respective communities. But it is an opportunity to come together as a team, which makes our voice and advocacy work perhaps a little stronger. So I'll share that date with everyone as well, and that was just announced recently. The other thing is, as we celebrate School Board Recognition Month, you've been getting probably quite a bit of information from the Minnesota School Board Association, really focusing on the primary issue of public education advocacy. And I know that that's a priority for the strategic priority for the Minnesota School Board Association this year. I am going to be going to a 3-day workshop in that area, and hopefully we'll come back and be able to share some of the work that's underway to ensure that we have voices heard in lifting up public education at this time. And then I have two shout outs. One of the things, as I review our board packet every time we have a meeting, I see the extraordinary gifts that our kids and our families are donating to our programs. So when I look at all the donations that this district receives for various schools and programming that generous individuals provide, and also booster clubs and communities, and I'm sure work partners of organizations. I just think that's really extraordinary, and it isn't always, I know it's appreciated by individuals who are the recipients, but I think when you start to look at the overwhelming numbers, sometimes it just is a really important gift as we struggle with resources to make sure that every child has exceptional opportunities, as we talk about. So wanted to thank them. I also had the opportunity to head over to Adam's Fam Jam the other night, and the teachers did an extraordinary job of supporting parents in how they can support their kids at home. And I know all of our schools are having parent nights kind of thing, but to see that in action and the amount of commitment from our staff and our teachers and principal all out there, and it's raining outside and everything got moved in, but children were happy, and the event was very well attended, and I know that that's happening across. So just a note of gratitude for all the overtime we don't always recognize for our staff that they put in to make sure that our families feel well supported and welcome in the schools. That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else have an update? I'll just add, I had the opportunity to attend the school information night at Champlin Brooklyn Park Academy, and just a brief introduction. Some of the elementary schools in our districts, I think 17 of them in total, are what are considered Title schools, Title I schools. And one of the requirements of that funding is that you hold school information nights, parent engagement activities. And so this was one of those that Dr. Langenfeld just mentioned. And the staff did such an incredible job of getting a large group of parents there, answering questions, talking about everything the school offers, how the new CKLA curriculum is working and Bridge to Read in the classrooms, and what they can do to partner with parents at home in supporting that push towards increased literacy. It was just a great presentation and super informative. So I would encourage anyone in the community, any parents, family members, and any board members that get the chance to attend one of those nights. It's a very impactful discussion. That is all from me. Anybody else? All right. So with that, our next item is going to be conducted in a closed session. So this executive session will be closed to discuss labor negotiations pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.03, discussing matters with all open groups. The closed session will be in the Michael Sullivan Room. I would entertain a motion to move to closed session.
So moved.
Thank you, Director Simon. Is there a second? Thank you, Director Audette. Any discussion? Hearing none, would all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Any opposed say no. With 6 in favor and 0 opposed, we will move to executive session in the Michael Sullivan Room after a 5-minute break. We are recessed.